Hello, and welcome to Literature History Final Assignment. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Sayid Hassan Ariel, student number 1814-025016, class of English Literature A 2018. There are 3 points of interest in this slide that I will read. First, what did you learn from this class? Second, what was the lesson learned of this class? Third, what is the next plan after joining this class? The 18th century of literature, known as Neoclassical, Augustan Age, or the Age of the Enlightenment, reason, intellect, satirical spirit, were the features of this period. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift is a masterpiece of satire. It was an accusation against the British people, society as a whole. 18th century literature. The authors of literary work started to look towards themselves as the inspiration for their work as a result of the idea of freedom of individuals. Romantic period. Although literature never merely history, the novel becomes a moral history of modern life, with Dickens tragically elaborately so in George Eliot Middlemarch, a novel exemplifying a principle Eliot derived from Scott: there is no private life which has not been determined by a wider public life. Yet the wider life was interesting to George Eliot because it had shaped moral and emotional life of a single person. High Victorian period. Late 19th century English literature remained remarkably insular in its styles and preoccupation. Its predominant concerns with English society and its ill, with English religion and its development, and with England's position within the United Kingdom and as a center of the still expanding colonial and commercial empire. There often seems to be full enough justification for this insularity, though not all the reasons behind justification were bred of success. He writing concerned with the imperial expansion of the much domestic discourse on social and political problems. Late Victorian period. In 1919, a Victory Medal was struck in Britain for presentation to all those soldiers who had survived what was described on the surface as the Great War for Civilization. As the word of the war poet suggests, civilization had effectively floundered in the mire of the trenches or had been pitted and hauled by the mechanisms and machines of modern military destruction. If Britain and the British Empire had emerged politically unscathed, the same was not true to the rest of combatant Europe, nor was it true of the minds and opinions of survivors of those too young to fight. When the London-based American poet Ezra Pound wrote bitterly in Hugh Selwyn Moberly 1920 of a human sacrifice in the name of an old bitch gone in the teeth eye for a botched civilization, he was not merely summing a hideous end of an era, he was also asserting the rights and privileges of a new literature which would attempt to sever itself from traditions and traditional sanctions of the old botched civilization. Edwardian period. One of the most striking and popular visual images to emerge from wartime Britain was John Armstrong's modestly surreal painting Can Spring Be Far Behind of 1940. Armstrong, who was employed with Henry Moore, Graham Sutherland, Paul Nash, and John Piper as an official war artist, drew an outsized tulip sprouting from the bomb ruins of houses and factory set against purplish early morning sky. His poetic title derived from Shelley's ode to the West Wind, enforces the idea of a spring of hope succeeding a winter of destruction. Unlike the Battle of the First World War, the bombing raids of the Second World War brought death and disillusion to what was known as the home front, modernism era. The years after 1945 saw both continuities and changes in English poetry. Some poets, despite modernism, continue romantic tradition, writing deeply personal responses to the world and engaging with eternal elemental themes. The central viewpoint in their poem is an I, a single voice recording experience directly and shaping them in generally traditional poetic forms. Other poets are not as clearly in the romantic tradition. The I in their poem is more indirect, and experience is presented more ironically. The focus is restricted, concentrating more on the particulars of everyday life. However, no poet fits nearly into the categories of romantic or anti-romantic, and some resist this useful but simplified categorization. 20th century. The defining event, the first part of the 21st century, was an attack on American targets, including Twin Towers in New York on September 11, 2001. The attack had a huge impact in every sense, emotionally, culturally, politically, all over the world. Imaginative responses to it went through the stages of shock, grief, anger, and assimilation. This concern to make sense of a fragmented and rapidly changing world is a natural function of literature. The shock and awe of the 1990s leads to a stable, new kind of narrative, sometimes government-led, about threats to the very fabric of society. The economic crash of 2008, wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the War on Terror, have all contributed to create the particular atmosphere of the early years of the 21st century. Review of the class. What was the lesson learned of this class? The lesson I picked up after this class was how sometimes easy and hard it was for literary works to change following the course of the history. How significant it was to the progress of mankind to build society of literature works. What is the next plan after joining this class? I will use my little knowledge of literature history to improve my understanding of English literature and hope one day I manage to apply it in my daily life. Thank you. If you have any question, you can find me at bunyahassan@gmail.com and my YouTube channel.